everyone, welcome back to our channel, Hume's Little Homestead. Today I'm going to show you how I trim my tomato plants. I actually did this last week, but I purposely left one to get a little more wild to show you how to trim them. I like to stay on top of it and trim those lower branches so that there's good airflow for the tomato plants, and this will help your plants thrive and develop healthy, and it'll fight any blight. We don't have, where I live, it's not very humid, so we don't have many issues with those types of things, but I did notice last year was my first year to try this method of trimming tomatoes. I noticed that my plants grew way healthier and stronger than they ever have before. They were way taller than me. I'm only 5 foot, but they ended up being like 6 to 7 feet tall. It was crazy. Don't do this if you have determinate tomatoes. If you have a determinate tomato, you do not want to prune them like this. I do this for my indeterminates, and I like indeterminate plants because where I live, sometimes our season might get extended out into the fall, and the tomatoes will just keep producing all summer long. So that's why I grow indeterminates. And what I was going to say is, if you don't know what you're growing, don't worry, just Google it. So let's take the Roma tomato, for example. Just type into Google Roma tomato, and then it will tell you what is Roma tomatoes indeterminate or determinate. Another one I'm growing is yellow pear. I know that it's indeterminate, but if you need to know yellow pear, what is it? And then I'm growing black cherry. So just type in the type of tomato plant. If you're not sure, I can't really help you if you're not sure what tomato you're growing. Try and guess. But anyway, this is for indeterminate plants. And I guess even on determinates, you could probably trim the very lowest branches. The reason I like to trim those branches is because I bottom water. It's not good to use a sprinkler system on your garden and water over it, because that water will damage the leaves. So when you're watering your gardens, it's best if you bottom water and use bottom irrigation and don't use a sprinkler on your plants, because it could damage your plants. The sun. Okay, using Roma as an example was an important thing because I just Googled in Roma tomato and it says that it is a determinate tomato. So I'm not going to be trimming my Roma tomatoes like this, but I will trim the lower branches of the tomatoes. I'm not going to trim off their flowers though. So with my indeterminates, I trim their flowers right now and their leaves. So yeah. Make sure and Google what type you have. I have some Romas, so I'm going to get my chart and make sure I don't prune the Romas. The other thing I'm doing today, which I'm really excited about, my project with my English Lavender, Foxglove, Feverfew, White Star, St. John's Wort, Snapdragons, and Yarrow Colorado mix worked very well. They are doing fantastic. So I am going to be separating the Snapdragons. I'm going to see if I can just keep them all. I've been watching videos all morning about how to trim them and how to thin them, and I just don't want to lose any of them, so I'm going to try and separate them all and keep them all, and hopefully get some really pretty Snapdragons. I've done this in the very wrong time of year. I should have started them in the fall or early, like in January, when I started my pepper plants. So this is the wrong time of year for starting Snapdragons. I'm just doing a major experiment right now. So I'm going to separate them out into little cups, and that'll be that. Oh, one more thing while I'm in this room. Quail update. They're doing great. We do have 8 now. The last one hatched, and it's a lot smaller than the others, but it'll be okay. I think it'll catch up. And it looks a little sad right now because it was kind of stuck in its egg. So it was probably bad that I opened the incubator, because I think it did get a little shrink wrapped, but it's okay. It's doing okay. I've seen it eating and drinking, but it looks a little sad. I'm just letting you know before I show you how it looks. So there it is, the last one that hatched. And see, it's not very fluffy, but it can run around just fine. It can run around just fine. And I switch the paper towel every evening. He can want some food. So it's doing well. It's smaller than the others because it's a day younger. And it had a little hard time getting out of its egg. But it was a celadon, and so I was excited about that. And here are these guys. I did put the lid on this one. I was going to make a lid for this one, but I never did. But mostly, if they jump out, I don't want them getting mixed up. So this is mostly in case they start jumping out, because I've heard that they can do that. In case they start jumping out, I've got a lid over one. So the ones that would be running around would be the celadons, and there's less in there, so might have an easier time catching 3 instead of 5. So we'll see though. So far they're doing great. We're going to finish the hutch this weekend. And all right, let's go trim a tomato plant, and that will be it for this video. The tool I'm using looks like this. I'm not exactly sure what it's called. I did buy it at Tractor Supply a couple of years ago. I love it. It's great. It fits in my hand perfectly, so just find what you think. I have used scissors to this in the past, just regular kitchen scissors, but I found that actually getting a tool made for trimming, I think that it did say that on the little label, is that it was for like trimming trees and stuff. The blade just works way better than like kitchen scissors. So I will say that, but you can just use whatever you have. I mean, do what you can, right? All right, I got my chart and I got my clippers. And the tomato I'm doing today is called a large red cherry tomato. Very common tomato plant. And I let it go a little wild, and it actually needs to be tied up today as well. So I might put that on this video too. But let me show you how it's looking. It's looking fabulous. And because it's a cherry tomato, I'm actually going to go ahead and leave the flowers because it'll be able to, the tomatoes that it grows are going to be tiny, so it'll be fine. So I'm going to put the camera somewhere where you can see what I'm doing. There. So all of these branches down here, see how they can get bug bites, and it's just, the tomato needs airflow. So I am just going to carefully trim off all the lower branches. And I'm actually going to leave this branch, but cut it right here so that it's not on the ground. Leave the branch for shade. Now, I'm wondering if you can see. Can you see right here? So you can see that this is a branch growing, and this is like in the armpit in between. So this is the regular stem, and this is a branch that's growing, and it's putting off suckers. This branch will grow a whole new tomato plant if you want, and this one too. So I am going to prune out those, well, this one's touching the ground, so I'm going to prune that all the way off. I don't want any branches touching the ground. I want this to be free. So actually I am going to prune that one too. Okay, so I want this to have a lot of good airflow, and I don't want to let these inside branches grow. This little branch right here that's growing in the armpit, I'm not going to let that grow, so I'm going to just pinch that one off because it's very small. And then I have where it's split because I let this one grow. This is not the plant. This is sending off a whole nother plant. So I'm going to leave it today because it's very hot and I don't want to stress the plant out too much. But this branch down here that's touching the ground, I'm going to trim it up a little so that none of the branches are touching the soil. Okay? Alright, that's all I'm going to do with this plant today. Like I said, it's very hot. I am going to mulch it and I am going to tie it up to the cattle panel. I just use cattle panels. This is not my original idea. This is from Jess from Roots and Refuge Farm YouTube channel. I love her channel. She has way better tips on tomatoes than I can give you. But since I followed her methods, I will put a link to how she does her tomatoes in my description box. Because most of what I learned from her. The tip of planting the tomato way down deep in the ground, I learned that from my grandma. But these other things like trimming and trellising, I never thought to do that. I always just used those tomato cages that you can get at the store and just let the plants like bush out. And I mean, I got good harvest that way, but it was so hard to harvest the tomatoes because I'm weaving in and out of like a jungle. And doing it this way, it like was so nice because I could walk down the row, pick the tomatoes, and the kids could pick the tomatoes, and it was more systematic and it was really functional and I really like it. So I will be growing my tomatoes like this from now on. I won't be using those tomato cages. I did use my leftover tomato cages for our peach trees to keep rabbits away from them. We wrapped chicken wire around those, and I also used a tomato cage for a pepper this year, and it is working really well for the pepper. It was a really big peppercini plant that I got pretty big, and so before I planted it out, and next year I'm hoping to try and keep some of my pepper plants like perennials, treat them like perennials. But if I start my peppers again from seed next year, I'm going to start them in January, just like I did with that peppercini, because it's like putting off fruit already, and it's super early in the season for me to be getting any fruit. So that is really cool. I am definitely going to do that next year. Start my peppers in like January and put them in really big pots instead of trying to keep them in smaller pots. So, all right, that's how I am trimming that tomato. I'm going to tie it up and give it a little mulch. I did mulch everything yesterday except I was going to make this video and show you. Anyway, just put some mulch around the base of the plant. That's all you do. I'll show you one that's done. And I wasn't going to mulch with straw this year, but Tractor Supply didn't have any. So that's how it looks after you've mulched your plants. And I need to trim this one already again. That's awesome. So all that trimming I just did on that plant that I just showed you, I did that to all of these, and they're all looking bushy again. They're doing really well. But it just really helps, so you can see when there starts to get insect damage, it really helps if you just either pinch or trim off the edges. That way the tomato can put all of its energy into the new growth at the top and not try and save the bottom growth. And it just helps because insects are attracted to that. If there's stress on your plants, they're attracted to that scent. And so if you just chop it off, get rid of it, take it way far away from your garden, and your plants will do better. All right, thanks for hanging out with me today. I hope that you enjoyed these tips on trimming tomatoes. And today I've been married for 11 years. It's our anniversary. Super excited. We're doing our trip next week because this weekend we're taking our son for his birthday trip. Because June is kind of a crazy month for us. We have our anniversary, and then a few days later is my son's birthday, and then a few days later is my birthday. So it's a really fun month. And at the beginning of the month is my mom and grandma's birthday, and I also have a bunch of cousins born in June, so it's a great month. We love June. Thanks for watching. If you haven't done so already, please like and subscribe. If you have, I want to give you my thanks. I really appreciate all of you who are subscribed and who are following along with our homesteading journeys. It has been really fun. We've had the channel up for 2 months now, and it's just going really well, and I'm super happy and grateful for everything. Bye, all of you, and I'm a little bit sweaty. I was checking on the meat birds and everything. I've decided to add one last thing to this video because at the beginning of it, I should have researched before I started filming, but I did not, and I was like, I think I said aromas are indeterminate, and I was totally wrong, so I might edit that part out. If I don't, here is a little snippet of the true information. I just Googled it, just like I told you to do. If you don't know what type of tomatoes you're growing, Google it. Is it indeterminate or is it determinate? Again, indeterminate means they're going to grow and produce fruit as long as the weather is nice. Determinate means they're going to grow to a certain height, they're going to produce a certain amount of flowers, and that's all they're going to put off, is that amount of fruit. Determinate, you don't want to trim off your flowers and fruit. Anyone can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm still a bit new to learning all of this. I've been gardening for a while now, but last year was my very first best year of harvest and actually got a harvest. So feel free in the comments to let me know if I'm wrong. But I went ahead and Googled every single tomato plant I'm growing. I'm growing quite a few different kinds. And last year I did the same thing and I didn't have any problems with cross-pollination or anything like that. I am not saving seeds. So that's the important note, is that I'm not saving seeds. But last year, every plant I planted grew true to type, and they were all scattered in amongst each other. So again, correct me if I'm wrong on any of that. But so far, from my own studies and my own gardening, what I have noticed is it's the seed that determines the fruit. Okay, so if I plant a seed that was from a seed pack that says it's going to be a scallop squash, then it's going to be a scallop squash. But if I save seed for next year and my seeds got cross-pollinated, that's when the problem happens. But I'm not talking about pollination right now or seed saving, but what I am talking about is the tomatoes I'm growing. So the first one I have is VR Moscow. VR Moscow is a determinate tomato. So that means it's only going to produce the amount of fruit that it's going to produce. So don't trim that one. So VR Moscow, determinate. Pink Brandywine, indeterminate. It's going to grow forever and get huge and beautiful and make awesome fruit. So that's Pink Brandywine, indeterminate. Cherokee Purple, indeterminate. Matt's Wild Cherry, indeterminate. I noticed with all the cherry tomato plants that I planted, they are all indeterminate. So I don't know if that is like their species. All cherry tomato plants are indeterminates, but on my list that I'm growing, they are. So the cherry tomato plants that I'm growing are indeterminate. So Matt's Wild Cherry, indeterminate. These are so delicious. They're so tiny. I've never met a tomato I don't like. That's not true. I don't like rotten or soggy tomatoes. But I love tomatoes, and I cannot wait for mine to start producing. Okay, next row. I have large red cherry. Those are indeterminate. Sweetie, which is also a cherry type, indeterminate. And then next to that I have the Roma tomatoes, and those are determinate. Then I have Wisconsin 55, and it says semi-determinate. So I'm not going to be trimming any of the flowers or fruit off of that, like the flowers off of that are going to be fruit, because it says semi-determinate. But I will trim, on all of these, I will trim the bottom so that their leaves aren't getting wet from the water. The next is a tomatillo. I'm not really sure if it is considered a tomato, but it is indeterminate. I just Googled it. So I'm growing some tomatillos, and they are also indeterminate. Large red cherry, indeterminate. Martian Giant. It's a semi-determinate, so it's the same as the Wisconsin 55, semi-determinate. So I'm not going to be trimming off any of the flowers that grow on that. Yellow Brandywine. And actually, I'm going to do an experiment this year and not trim any of the flowers. Last year, I trimmed the flowers to let the plants get really big, but then I didn't have, my harvest was pretty late, so I'm going to try and just leave the flowers on this year. So that's my experiment this year, but I am going to be pruning the plants and making sure they don't just take, like, making sure they stay in their own space so that they have good airflow so that they will have a chance to produce. Okay, Yellow Brandywine, indeterminate. Yellow Pear, indeterminate. Beefsteak, indeterminate. Roma, I already said. Determinant, another VR Moscow determinant. It's kind of nice I put those in the same row. That'll be easy to remember. Chadwick Cherry, indeterminate. So, indeterminate. San Marzano, indeterminate. Tomatillos, indeterminate. San Marzano. Martian Giant. Martian Giant is semi-determinate. I know I already said that, but I'm just making sure I go down all my list so I can get all the varieties I'm growing for you guys on this video. Black Krim, indeterminate. I loved the Black Krim last year. They were, I think those were my favorite, the Black Krim. It's so hard to choose. Amish Paste, indeterminate. And so Amish Paste are very similar to Roma. So if you're wanting an indeterminate tomato plant that is similar to a Roma, go with the Amish Paste. So Amish Paste and Roma are in a competition this year. I'm going to see which one does better for me. Black Cherry, because then I'm going to grow whichever one does the best. Black Cherry is an indeterminate, and then the Green Zebra is an indeterminate. And I just love that. I'll always have at least one because they're just such a fun, yeah, just a minute. They're just such a fun, different tomato. Like, I like to grow the fun, different tomatoes. So I like to have a lot of variety in the garden. All right, those are the tomatoes I'm growing. And that is if they are indeterminate or determinate. It's a pretty big list. There are so many awesome tomatoes to try, though. So if you don't know what it is, just Google it. It was very simple. I just did the speak in, and I did it in 5 minutes. Got all my tomatoes labeled out if they were determinate or indeterminate. I just said into Google, is a are VR Moscow tomato plants determinate? And it goes, yes, it is a determinate plant. You know, it does this little do Martian voice, computer voice. Anyway, thanks for hanging out with me today. That is determinate and indeterminate tomatoes and what I am growing and what they are. So hopefully that list helps and makes a little more sense. Okay, bye.